Thanks for joining us. And today we're going to talk about clearing the confusion about Samadhi in Kriya Yoga. So some Kriya Yogis have claimed that they are able to enter the exalted state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So what is Samadhi? Well, in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, he talks about two main distinctions about Samadhi. One is the Samprajnata Samadhi and the Asamprajnata Samadhi. And the Samprajnata Samadhi relates to having meditative absorption on an object. And whereas Asamprajnata Samadhi relates to having an absorption, a meditative state of absorption with no object. Now this Asamprajnata Samadhi is synonymous with what is called Nirbija Samadhi, Samadhi without seed, also referred to as Animitta Samadhi, signless Samadhi. And so some think that they have attained this seedless Samadhi, this Nirbija Samadhi, or signless Samadhi when the mind is relatively quiet. And this is not the case at all. To be able to be in Nirbija Samadhi, one needs to have viraga, which means dispassion. In Nirbija Samadhi, if one identifies with any phenomenal experience that one has in meditation, it pulls one out of Nirbija Samadhi. So if one maintains this dispassion, this viraga towards arising sense phenomena, what happens is the sense of the separate perceiver starts to dissolve. And it dissolves into an experience of the unconditioned absolute, what is called nirvana or nibbana. And when one experiences this, the sense of the separate self stops as one comes into contact with the absolute unconditioned. Well, that's what the Buddha said, isn't it? It's true, the Buddha did discover the elements of samadhi experience that leads to a cessation, a nirodha of the sense of separate self. But this is not an exclusively Buddhist phenomenon. He merely recognized this universal process, mapped it out, and gave particular instructions towards achieving the cessation. This is a universal process that happens in the highest levels of meditation. And really, this is part of the awakening process when one is able to recognize that the sense of separate self that one is constructing, the ego identity or ahamkara, has limits, that it is not perpetual, that is not everlasting, that is subject to arising and passing away. And when one sees that clearly through that experience of Nirbija Samadhi and the resulting cessation, one is more likely to let go of the idea of the separate self. There's another dichotomy used in Kriya Yoga around Samadhi, and it has to do with Salvikalpa and Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So in his commentary on chapter 1, verse 10 of the Bhagavad Gita, Yogananda writes, "In the state of Salvikalpa Samadhi, the attention and the life force are switched off from the senses and are consciously kept identified with the ever-joyous spirit. In this state, the soul is released from the ego consciousness and becomes aware of spirit beyond creation. The soul is then able to absorb the fire of spirit wisdom that roasts or destroys the seeds of body-bound inclinations. The soul as the meditator, its state of meditation, and spirit as the object of meditation all become one. The separate wave of the soul meditating in the ocean of spirit becomes merged with the spirit. The soul does not lose its identity, but only expands into spirit. In Savikalpa Samadhi, the mind is conscious only of the spirit within. It is not conscious of creation without the exterior world. The body is in a trance-like state, but the consciousness is fully perceptive of its blissful experience within." And in the same commentary, he also talks about Nirvikalpa Samadhi. In the most advanced state, Nirvikalpa Samadhi, the soul realizes itself and spirit as one. The ego consciousness, the soul consciousness, and the ocean of spirit are seen as all existing together. It is a state of simultaneously watching the ocean of spirit and the waves of creation. The individual no longer sees himself as a John Smith related to a particular environment. He realizes that the ocean of spirit has become not only the wave of John Smith, but also the waves of all other lives. In Nirvikalpa Samadhi, the soul is simultaneously conscious of spirit within and of creation without. The divine man in the Nirvikalpa state may even engage in performance of his material duties with no loss of inner God union. So according to this definition, Nirvikalpa Samadhi is not a state that one attains in meditation, but a level of awakening, a awakening to the realization of the unity of the divine in oneself and others. And this is what many may call enlightenment, God realization, or final awakening. It is not a meditative state that is attained by those who are still working through karmic patterns. Another way to understand Nirvikalpa Samadhi is to look at the word itself. Vikalpa is a Sanskrit term which means view or orientation, and it relates to the ways that we see the world. And really, this is a narrative description that we have about what is unfolding within our experience. These narratives are usually guesses at best and can be rife with interpretation, misinterpretation, and confabulation. In neuroscience, they talk about having an interpreter mode of the brain that is constantly giving a narrative about what is happening in one's experience. And this is likely an evolutionary adaptation that helps to support prediction error processing, which is a way that the mind can recognize and store particular types of experiences and learn from them. Now, this can be helpful in an evolutionary context where one is in a survival situation, or any kind of scenario where a particular attention is needed for the continuity of one's survival. But when this becomes one's default state, it becomes a liability as one is overburdened with conceptualization, where the actual experience of life starts to fade into the background and the conceptualization of life comes to the forefront. This creates a cognitive prison that is very difficult to escape from, and the state of mind in which most people experience their waking awareness. Now that we understand the word vikalpa, let us look up at the prefix of nirvikalpa. Nir means without, and so therefore we could translate nirvikalpa as non-conception. And so in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, we're not talking about a temporary cessation of vikalpas as a result of meditative absorption, but rather a permanent paradigm shift that moves one away from the compulsive conceptualization of one's experience. In other words, we're talking about a level of awakening or realization that shatters the mirror of self-referential thought. Now, there are those who believe that one can attain awakening or self-realization through meditation alone. Sadly, this is not the case for most. In most cases, the yogis who have those non-dual experiences are glimpsing the non-dual experience. But this glimpsing is not enough for full awakening, as recognizing the process of ahamkara, ego-making or I-making, and abandoning that process, recognizing one's true essence nature as the ground of being, and then integrating past experiences, samskaras, karmic seeds, and present experiences. That integration process is absolutely essential for final awakening. So this integration process is really about discarding vikalpas, these descriptions of the separate self, of embracing the experiences that one has in everyday life, allowing those to be perceived from the center of the ground of being, one's true essence nature, of integrating past experiences, samskaras, these undissolved past experiences that need to be integrated before true awakening occurs. Without this level of integration, no amount of transcendental experience in meditation is going to solve the recurring reactivity in one's life, which is an indication of separate ego consciousness, sense of separate self, and is driven by the whims of self-referential thought. Trying to sustain an ongoing state of samadhi, of meditative absorption, without the integration process is a form of spiritual bypassing. It will never lead to true awakening. Rather, one stops pretending to be the ego. One recognizes one's true essence nature, and one integrates those past undigested experiences, those samskaras, and one's present experiences from the view as one is grounded in one's essence nature until a crucial threshold is reached and one experiences a permanent paradigm shift that constitutes awakening. So if you have any questions about this video, feel free to send me an email at info@modernkriya.com. Also check our website at modernkriya.com and our YouTube channel. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.